Welcome back. This Christmas and the festive season may not be a very merry one for some members of the LGBTIQA+ community, as many of them spend this period without their families. This may be because of the discrimination they face and sometimes even being disowned by their own families and communities for their sexual identity. To tell us more about this, we are joined by Brian Sibeko-Ngidi, who is the director at Uthing Network, a non-profit organization based in Pietermaritzburg which works with LGBTIQ+ individuals in promoting recognition of this community through institutional change and participating in rural South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Which pockets of society do you see the most resistance when it comes to families not accepting their members who belong to the LGBTQI community?
So I think for me it cuts across. We cannot really say it's more it's predominant in a certain pocket. I think society across the South African society as a whole is a bit, backwards, as much as we have a beautiful constitution, but we still find that, families and societies still struggle, or I don't know if it's a struggle or what, but, do not make time to understand LGBTI people and understand that LGBTI people are human beings like any other South African. So, yeah, it's a bit challenging for me to comprehend, we've made, such great strides. We've achieved a lot when it comes to LGBT equality on paper, but also on the ground level in societies and families and all other pockets of society, we still experience a lot of rejection, discrimination, and anti-LGBTI, social norms that, fuel the discrimination and abuse of LGBTI people.
What do you think contributes to that backwardness? Why do you think we're not moving forward, especially as such a progressive country that we are, being South Africa? Why do you think that some people still find it difficult to be accepting?
I think it's also an issue of, hegemonic, cultural and religious discourses and ideas. And people thinking that if they accept LGBTI people, they might be doing an injustice to their cultural or religious beliefs. The Bible and culture, I think if you are a Zulu, they tell you that it's against, the Zulu culture, a man is to be like this or perform or behave in a certain way. So I think culture and religion play a major role, in informing people's ideas or feelings towards LGBTI people. And we're also being selective about culture or, what kind of people or which segment of society we accept. And I think when it comes to LGBTI issues or people, it's the whole notion that it's a Western idea. It has never been like this in Africa, pre-colonial eras and all of that. But I think for me, that's unfounded, and we know facts actually prove otherwise. So people should just stop hiding behind their culture and religion and basically come out as homophobic or anti-LGBTI, without trying to justify their reasoning. Because I think we can learn to accept each other and love one another. We have beautiful case studies where people, end up, living in a society where everybody else is accepted. I don't know why it's difficult for us to accept LGBTI people when we can, accept a criminal who's regarded as rehabilitated, or someone who has raped, a minor, or who has raped anyone for that matter. So as families, we are also hypocrites because families would rather break bread with their relatives who have raped people, who have killed, and who have stolen stuff, but they cannot, break bread around this festive season with their brothers and sisters who are, LGBTI or non-binary. So I don't understand where the moral compass leads us in this case.
So for those whose families aren't able to break bread with them, especially now during this festive season, how do they deal with an unaccepting family?
Oh, it's a difficult one, right? So, I know for the general population, the festive season is a beautiful time where families get together, we break bread together today, and we all take part in the festivities. But for LGBTI people, today or this season actually is characterized by, a lot of anxiety, depression, and feelings of being rejected for who you are. So there are people who can actually escape from this. Some have the privilege of having their own spaces or their own houses. But still, that's not enough because it means that you might end up spending Christmas by yourself because you can't go and celebrate with your family. and perhaps sometimes you create your own community of friends who might have, accepting families and would rather go back to their families and leave you behind by yourself. And then sometimes I think, for me, what I've realized, what I've seen and experienced, over the past couple of years is that queer people would actually come together and form their own families, to support each other, so that, they can have some sense of community, some sense of belonging, around the festive season. Because, when you go back home, number one, you might have to go back into the closet if you live for example, we have people who live in major cities who have the freedom to be who they are in those cities. But, around this festive season, they have to go back home and hide who they are, go back to the closet, or actually have to endure, the anti-LGBTI, what you call sentiments, by their families. Because some families can actually be overt, about their homophobia. And to some extent, some people even experience violence. So I think for LGBTI people, and from my experience, if you can't go back home, try and find your own, community of friends, or it could even be, there are families who are, who embrace LGBTI people. If you can find a structure like that, try and, ensure that, you spend your festive season around people who love and accept you. Because it doesn't help if you force yourself into a situation that, does not accept or value you for who you are.
Speaking of structures, you run a network, a non-profit organization in Pietermaritzburg. How important is it for civil society organizations to be able to participate, especially in promoting recognition and especially institutional change?
It's very important, and it's sad. Like I mentioned earlier on, for a country with a progressive constitution, we shouldn't be working so hard to ensure that we change, negative social norms and ideas, and anti-LGBTI, ideologies across societies. But, reality shows us that if we don't do anything, nothing will change. LGBTI people will continue being killed, being discriminated and violated across societies. So our work is very important to ensure that, we strive towards inclusive and affirming LGBTI affirming and inclusive societies. So we work with the broader communities, we work with policymakers, we work with, difficult, social groups like traditional leaders and religious leaders for that matter. So it's important for us to ensure inclusion of LGBT people across societies, be it in the religious space, be it in the cultural spaces, but basically ensuring that South Africa or Africa, and I think the whole world, as a whole, is inclusive and accepting of LGBTI people, because at the end of the day, we are guided by human rights, we are guided by laws that stipulate what needs to happen. But if our governments, relax and not do much, then it's the duty of, civil society organizations like Uthing Network and the others who work across the country, to ensure that we implement, interventions that help us realize an LGBTI affirming society for everyone.
Lastly, how would you implore for South Africans, apart from government and apart from civil society organizations, to come together in destigmatizing that against people who are belonging to the LGBTI community?
I think the most important thing is, for people to have, the willingness to learn and understand. I've also realized that some people discriminate, against LGBTI people because they don't have, the relevant information. Their beliefs are actually informed by misconceptions and myths around LGBTI people. So I think the first thing is the willingness to learn, but also to ensure that, if you don't understand something, ask for clarity. There's also, we live in an information, era. There's no excuse for people to be misinformed or ignorant when information is easily available. So I think for people, we need to just learn. If you don't understand something, there's Google, we have libraries. At this day and age, we can even access our libraries, virtually. So just try and learn and understand, get as much information as you can, but also try and remember that despite our identities and our sexual orientations, we are all human beings, and we all want to belong to a community or belong to their families and also feel loved like everybody else. And I think it's possible to reach or achieve an LGBTI affirming society for all.
It certainly is possible. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Brian Sibeko-Ngidi, the director of Uthing Network, speaking to us there about the inclusion of the LGBTI community, especially during this time of the year.